Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my latest installment. For this video, I'm mixing things up a little bit, and I wanted to cover more than one title, kind of like a rapid fire kind of thing, but knowing how long I just go on and on and on, it probably won't be very rapid, actually. But as many who are familiar with my channel may know, I recently watched the third and final installment for In Search of Darkness, the documentary which focuses on horror films of the 80s. Being, if they were a big theatrical release or even something that was straight to video and rarely even spoken of these days. Needless to say, it gave me quite the nostalgic kick and got me in the mood to revisit some titles. So a few weeks back, I was very sick, so I basically slept half the day and watched movies the rest. During that time, checked out a few movies, some of them more on Tubi, which is definitely great. They have a lot of good horror titles on there and their ads aren't too intrusive. And there are a few others that I had to just track down other ways. But anyways, let me get into it. First one I'd like to mention is an old favorite of mine, which has stood the test of time, which is Waxwork from 1988, starring, among others, David Warner, Zach Galligan, you might know from Gremlins, as well as Dana Ashbrook from Twin Peaks later on, and Deborah Foreman, who's been in a lot of things, including Valley Girl, April Fool's Day, even had a small part in Real Genius. The basic synopsis for this is that a small town on a residential street, a waxwork opens up, which holds many displays that are based on old horror stories. So some college students are invited to check out like a midnight soft opening of sorts, and something kind of sinister is afoot, because these characters in the film are tempted to explore these wax sets, causing them to be transported into the story itself. And then they end up getting wrapped up in that story, and ultimately they meet their demise. This is part of a plan from the owner of the Waxwork, who deals in the dark arts, and he's going to use this to kind of open up the world to evil, so to say. So it's up to our surviving characters who didn't get pulled in yet to find a way to take him down and vanquish evil. So this one I have loved for years. And it's actually surprising that given new filming and special effects techniques that, over these past few decades, that they haven't actually done a remake of this. There's been a lot of Hollywood remakes, and sometimes they just want to tell the story from a different angle. Sometimes it's because they have better technology to tell that current story. But I really feel like this one was really balanced perfectly. They had not really, they had some in-camera effects and some physical effects. They didn't have all the CG, but the way that they balanced a very interesting story with a bit of mystery, a lot of humor thrown in here and there from some of the characters, and a lot of gore and violence. The fact that you get to see different kinds of horror stories, one about werewolves, one about vampires, one about like the Marquis de Sade. They really mix up what you're going to see every time somebody pops in there. I'm really surprised it hasn't been remade. It was excellent, definitely worth checking out. Second one I'd like to mention is Ghoulies from 1984. Now this was kind of seen by some as a Gremlins ripoff, but this is anything but. There's nothing about this is cute or cuddly or comedic, really. The story takes place as a man inherits a house that has been in his family for ages. He begins to learn about some occult history of the house and of the person who owned it before him, and even that he was actually involved in one of those stories when he was a baby. As he investigates, further, he decides, let's start harnessing these powers. Let's just try to do a little ritual ourselves. So he ended up producing these little minions for himself to kind of do his bidding, and among them are these little ghoulie creatures. So where the creature frights like gremlins and even critters, kind of work in this furry, cute aspect before things get ugly, this one is ugly the entire time. Simply really gross creatures popping up here and there. Now, some of the film does flow a little bit rough, especially in that later half, but it's still highly entertaining. I even remember when I saw it in the theater, I had this flashback of before seeing it being at dinner with a friend of mine and his family, and his sister somehow convinced me that we were actually going out to see a different movie, that they changed their mind, and that we were going to see the Barbra Streisand film Yentl. I fell for it the entire dinner. Luckily, it was all just a joke. We ended up seeing Ghoulies, but which is definitely a good change from possibly getting to a highly dramatic film with Barbra Streisand. But yeah, it's a very fun one, worth checking out, and that one, just like Waxwork, is also available on Tubi. And finally, since we already talked about some critters here, Critters from 1986. I remember this one, again being seen as some as a Gremlins ripoff, and again, they're wrong. There's nothing like Gremlins. These things aren't cute little cuddly things. Nothing's portrayed about them as cute and that you would want one as a pet or anything. They're basically an invasive species that devours and multiplies. These intergalactic exterminators / bounty hunters of sorts are alerted to their escape from a prison colony, and they're tasked with tracking them down and destroying them on this little planet called Earth. So this is another favorite of mine because it's aged quite well. The idea of these bounty hunters kind of changing their form to fit wherever they're currently operating does provide a little bit of light comedy here and there, and especially the fact that one of them has difficulty holding on to a form. It's like nothing seems to match them that well. We also get some comedy in the form of the town drunk, and the family situation in general. The brother and sister characters really go after each other. But that family also includes Dee Wallace of E.T., as well as Scott Grimes, who I mainly know as Malloy in The Orville. But where this film really excels is how they built out this town and the town's people. There is, a lot of heart in this film, which keeps you on the side of the town folks, of course, and fearing for their safety. Along with that, even the critters themselves, called Krites, had random bits of subtitles to add a little bit of humor, even after devouring the stomach of a young Billy Zane, who was in it as well. They did such a good job of kind of guiding me towards connecting with these characters and that town that, the very next night I queued up Critters 2, the main course from 1988. Some of the original cast returns for that one, meaning Scott Grimes, and besides him, I think it's just Lynn Shay, because she had a small role in it in the first one as well. But and of course the town drunk kind of comes back into this as well. And this one of the bounty hunters, came back, that actor. But they also did other stuff with that bounty hunter who couldn't really find a decent form, where he ends up turning into like a Playboy model for a while. It's really interesting. The characters that were replaced by other, there were a few that were replaced by other actors, but most of the other cast was just kind of written out of it. But hey, they kept Lynn Shay in, and that's all that really matters. But luckily, all those little changes, not getting the entire cast and so forth, it doesn't really distract from the story too much, which centers on the fact that even though these critters were taken out in the first film, there were eggs, and now they're hatching around Easter, so that adds a nice little thing to roll it all together. Roll for the critters, that's a good pun. Anyways, we get some amped up special effects, of course, more action, and it really is a worthy sequel that has stood the test of time. I know that there are other entries in Critters, at least 2 to 4 more after this, and there was a Shudder series that I guess they tried to do. I didn't really care for it. I don't remember much about it, but I do at least, plan on exploring some of the other film entries. But for now, Critters 1 and 2, you may have a hard time tracking them down. They might be on Hoopla, or you might need to pay for them on Amazon or Vudu. But they're definitely worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest little video of mine for this quick throwback of a few films there. This little multi-title recommendation if you want some little nostalgia or are interested about the films of the 80s, especially in the horror and a little bit lower budget that you might want to check out. Anyways, thanks for sticking around to the end, because as usual, that really does help out the algorithm quite a bit. And as usual, I do have some more videos coming up right around the corner. I'm doing another franchise revisit in about another week or two. So be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up that content. And I will see you in the next one.